Thank you all for coming out once again. It's been many months since we've gotten together. Staff has been working hard on the documents. Hopefully you've seen that in what you reviewed. Last we met in July of last year. We'd gone through the document. I think we'd come to consensus on a lot of the items. Staff had to work on doing application forms, and Zach will kind of go down through the document. We'll review what the changes are, take your input, but just to kind of give a little background to bring us back up to where we are today. Staff went through the document. We found a lot of repetitiveness in it. Originally, we've tried to streamline it. I think overall, I can't say that we've reduced the number of pages once we added back in the application forms, the checklists, and everything else. But we have gone through editing the process. This group recommended the planning board be the lead aid, or the lead on any project. We've tried to put that in and instill that into the document. We've continued to refine it. We've tweaked some of the pictures and some of the charts that are there. So tonight we wanted to kind of come back together and make sure this group was happy with the document. We've tried to keep the content that was there. We've tried not to change that, add or delete. Kind of just looking to refine the document, hopefully make it more readable. Tried to put more of the educational stuff up front, a little bit about what is mixed use, and then kind of hone into Penfield, and then hone into more of the details with that. So with that piece, I'll turn it over to Zach. But as always, keep an open conversation and throw out comments, and we'll get into details and discuss it further as we get into it.
Thank you, Mark. And like you said, feel free to jump in any time while I'm just going through some things. First thing that you would have probably noticed in the document is that we proposed a new name for the district. It used to be Route 250 Mixed Use District. We kind of came up as we were going through things saying, why not just go with the basic 9 Mile Point Mixed Use District? So that's on the table tonight for us to discuss if everyone's comfortable with a new name than what was just Route 250 before. That's specifically that area. Within the rest of the document, like Mark said, it didn't get exactly shorter, but we did clean up a lot of the organization, removed a lot of repetition, and overall streamlined the document, make it easier to read, easier to use. We added checklists, application forms for applications development, when that for reference in the back. We kind of dedicated the first chapter, this chapter 3, I believe it is. We kind of have a section there where it's, let's talk about just what mixed use is, not Penfield, but mixed use, kind of educate people on what they're reading, and then get more into the Penfield specific details, design standards, and again, lay that out in a clearer form, more structure to it, rather than just a kind of a ongoing story that it was. And we used all the feedback that we got from the committee from the last meeting and through email since, just noting all these things that were concerns before, and we try to do our best to adapt it into this document now that you have before you, that you had a chance to review. So like I said, there's the new layout. We did a lot of revisions in the sections to remove repetition, streamline everything. We updated the summary table, which is on page page 74. Saw some things that we wanted the committee to take a look at with Zone C. Updated some of the content within permitted uses, and also with the maximum dwelling units, we updated some of those areas. And we'll go through that later as we go through all the specific points in the table. Other thing we did was we worked on the mapping. That's another item that we're going to discuss tonight. Is we have a recommended district boundary map that follows property lines now. That was sent in the email that was originally to set this meeting. We had that as an attachment in there. Part of our discussion, we'll talk about reviewing that map, its borders, and then kind of how we're going to fit the zone A, B, and C, those bubbles that we had before. It used to be a study area. How we're going to mesh that in to the hard lines of the district. There's also, like I said, there's a checklist in the back for review for developers to look through, for us to kind of have an idea of what people will be required to do for developments. And that kind of covers a lot of the changes that we did. I guess what I'd like to do is just open it up to the committee, and if you have comments or concerns that you saw while reading the document, this is a great time for us to sit down, call them up on the screen, go through them and get some notes down and have some discussion about anything that you guys saw as a red flag. I guess I'll open it up to the committee. If anyone saw anything specifically.
Your first paragraph, it says that the 9 Mile Point mixed-use district is on Route 250 north of Atlantic and south of Penfield Center Road. It doesn't address anything south of that in your description.
Are we on this page?
First page, first paragraph.
68.
It doesn't address the,
Oh, the southern limit.
right.
Good catch. Thank you, Larry. We'll add a line into that paragraph to describe that then.
Okay. Second paragraph that was in that probably said the southern portion somehow was omitted from that. So it's important.
I thought it was there once before.
All the mapping obviously reflects the north and the south, so
Yeah.
we're not looking to eliminate that. That's obviously grammatical error. Obviously, the document's still evolving, still changing. You still have grammatical stuff to go through, but is there any other? We can go through the checklist. We do want to talk about the map and the parcels, but we want to make sure that you guys are happy with this at the end of the day. Hopefully making a recommendation to send it to the town board, but this is your document, your product to thank you to send along. So to make sure you guys are happy with it and are going to support it when.
Mark, I had a question on the summary of district requirements. Zach, you had it up there a minute ago, the
table.
chart, yeah, the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel bad, I didn't look carefully at this since July until very recently. And I was just looking at the minimum number of uses, and I didn't recall in Zone B the medium being 4 or more uses. But maybe that's my misrecollection. And I guess I almost need to be reminded on what would qualify as 4 uses, as an example.
That's some of what we debated before, was the different uses of, whether it's a townhouse or an apartment unit or whatever. And I think that's one thing we did debate is, whether the different parts of residential. I think we went one time and said, well, we'll make residential its own and it has to be everything else, but I think that's a little excessive to say residential is one use and then you got to have 3 other very different uses. But there are percentages in here that, say that it is a mixed-use district. There is some percent, and at least under Zone A, says that, and that's one point we want to bring up tonight with the group. We did talk about it with the Manitou group. Was I know the group and staff has continually struggled with this number. If you're looking under permitted uses here, mixed use, we're looking at a mix of commercial, retail, office, and residential uses, with 25% being non-residential, which we've struggled on some hands to say 25%, is that an arbitrary number? Should we, more match a market study or follow with that? Or we said, or is determined by the board having jurisdiction. I know we had some lengthy discussions at the Manitou group, and, I think the idea was to kind of possibly buffer that a little bit, so say there's a minimum number, so it's not all, one, an apartment complex, that it's just, we have that in other locations. We're not looking for a total residential setup, but also, maybe not being as fixed so that, if the market study, comes in and says that, this area can't support this much commercial, or the last developer came in and used 50% commercial, and is there flexibility in that? So that was one of the points we wanted to talk about with the group, is what your thoughts were on either holding a hard number on that. And I know Bob, shared before, we've had feedback from the consultant that they had in their experience, kind of a break-even number. They thought, above that level, you needed some commercial to make it a functional development versus having no commercial to being, a non-functional. So we were going to reach out to the consultant on that, but you look like you had a comment to make.
Well, I'm just trying to find, in terms of when you talk about uses, what's defined as a use? Is that here on like 311, page 16, types of mixed use?
Permitted uses, yes.
So if you're a developer and you're looking at a parcel that's, 30 acres, and you look at the table, and you're in zone B, you would need to look back at the 311 chart, types of mixed use, and go through at least 4 of those? Is that,
I believe you're...
just from a practical standpoint, how, page 16 was,
3.11 you got?
page 16?
Permitted uses. Those are types of uses. We do have permitted
Right.
uses, and actually that's more what's going to be in the ordinance. That's another piece we need to talk with the group about tonight, is we're also developing an ordinance. This is basically a guideline document. Some are guidelines, some are hard, fast requirements in this document, but we do need an adoptable ordinance, basically what goes in the code.
Right, so when you're talking about use,
There is a list of permitted uses in here that would detail out, okay, townhouse is one use, cottages are another
Got it.
use, commercial retail is it does detail down through all the permitted uses in here, so those would dictate what your uses are. This document is going to be shared with the group. We're at probably about an 80% with it right now, but until we made certain that the group was happy with this document, this kind of left this in flux. So once the group says, yes, we're happy with this, the manual's good, we'll refine this and then get this out to the committee to make sure that we're happy with this as well, because this basically sets the standard for what's adopted.
so the uses will be based on the zoning code, so if it's a, there could be 4 different residential uses.
Yes.
But that comes back to at least...
Well, it's listed, yeah.
Yes, so you could have, those could be 4 different residential uses, but then that came back under the Zone A discussion of, basically, since you have to have a mix of commercial, retail, office,
Right.
and residential, with 25% being the minimum of any one use.
So my question on that, Mark, is I don't think there are many 30-acre parcels in the map. And so when I look at that and I say medium, 2 to 30 acres, well, if I've got a 2 or a 5-acre parcel, and you got to stack 4 uses on there, but 70% of it's got to be residential, so we've got to have townhouse, cottage, something, 3 different uses plus some sort of a commercial use. That's a lot to stack into a 2 or 3 acre. And I get that that's not the intent to have a lot of 2 or 3 acre, developments. But the reality is, if you look at the map, I don't think there are a lot of 30-acre parcels. I mean, if you look at, I'm just thinking on the southeast side of 250 and Sweets Corners, if all of that available land was bundled together, it would be less than 30.
Okay. We can adjust
When you say
the...
southeast, crafts?
No, southeast of Sweets Corners and
Oh, southeast.
250. So there's a 13-acre, there's a little 20-acre, if it was all together, and they're not owned by one property owner.
We can adjust the...
Yeah, but see, the other thing you gotta look at is, you take another parcel, because I buy 4 of them, and all of a sudden I got more than 30.
Well,
Maybe not especially where you're talking, but, in other areas, I as a developer could buy several different property owners' property and then...
If they were for sale.
You have to make the assumption that it might be.
Well, that's fine, but my concern has been all along, at the end of this, what we want to do is have something that can be used, not something that prohibits
Sure.
future use.
I mean, that's been the balance all along, is having enough direction to get what we want, but also leaving it flexible enough that a developer can come in and do something unique and not box them in.
Right.
I mean, we could set large at 30-plus acres as 4 uses, and medium, 2 to 30 as a 3 uses or something, as kind of a step between. And then 2 or smaller, or 2 acres or smaller, it could be 2 uses if, I mean, that's up to the group. I mean, that's,
How do we know what we don't know?
That's the problem.
I mean, again, we can reach out to the consultant and, get a recommendation back from them. They asked if we wanted them here tonight. I
I mean,
didn't,
Bill's point is spot on. We all want to do something that's going to be worthwhile in the future. And since we don't know what we don't know, you're asking us a question of which I'm not trained to be able to give you
well, that's why we
decent
have,
answer.
I mean, if that's consensus, that's what we have a consultant for, and that's what we've paid them to provide recommendations, so that's,
But it does seem unlikely that if you have a 3-acre parcel, you're going to get 4 different uses on it. So maybe the medium needs to be something different than the larger, and something larger than the smaller.
That's really my point. I would-
Basically, not so much bigger range. Reduce the range from 2 to 30.
I think the medium is too broad. I think it should be,
Well, medium
10
comes
to
out
30
B.
or 10 to 30.
Yeah.
So have like tiny, small, medium, large.
Well, maybe you need 4, I don't know, but I just, the middle seems to be.
Well, what's the average property size that's in this area?
Sorry, you see the
What's-
average?
Yeah, what's the
Average
average
property size?
acreage?
I want to say I looked it up at one point.
I mean, there aren't many small parcels. I mean, I understand that somebody might do it that way, but medium is a pretty broad, 2 to 30.
okay, we can ask the consultant and also look at tightening up, what we consider to be a medium range. 2 to 30 is a widespread.
But we also have bundled large and medium together in their uses.
Yes, we haven't differentiated between them anyway, so, I mean, at least we can separate that out.
Right,
Between large
right.
and medium, so if it's 4 and 3, or adjust the range on the medium scale, make that not quite as,
And just so I understand, this is a requirement, not a recommendation. So if someone came in and said they wanted to have 2 uses on a 5-acre parcel, the way it's written right now, there'd be no opportunity for relief on that. Is that?
there is always relief with the zoning board of appeals.
Yeah, they have to go
So the zoning board of appeals is a relief for every code we have within the town, so that is always an option. We've tried to make this, flexible so that
So you don't have to do that
Right.
unless
the planning
it's...
board, has some flexibility in the document, but, I mean, the zoning board, you can appeal any town code to the zoning board if you so desire.
The goal is to make this,
Not to send you off to the board every time you...
Yeah,
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, we're not looking
We don't want
to
to.
make it an unbuildable thing where you have to go to the zoning board to do anything.
So it seems to me like the small limit should be higher than 2 acres, and the medium uses should be lower than 4.
What's the rest of the
I agree.
group's
I think
consensus?
these need to be recommendations you go with those guidelines, but it's a recommended guideline. And how else are we going to be able to avoid someone having to go to the zoning board because they deem that the property was best to go in that direction and it doesn't allow for them to have that flexibility?
The other side of that is how do you protect against having 40 acres of just apartments?
Well, even 2 use, I guess, well, 2 uses could be all residential, I guess, but 3 could too, in theory.
I mean, we've added that verbiage in here, or as determined by the board having jurisdiction. I mean, you could add that same language up above. If that's what the group's thoughts are, we can add that in as well, and then basically the developer comes in and makes their case proposal to the planning board as it's deemed right now, and, works through the process and, shows that, hey, yeah, I got 20 acres, but 5 of it's steep slopes and 3 of it's, wetlands, so I really only have 10 acres of buildable space, so maybe 3 uses is is too much for the amount of buildable space I have left. So, I mean, that's something.
Yeah, I'd like to see the parameters adjusted
Something to be
and
negotiated.
the option for the board to have jurisdiction.
And those kind of parameters are dictated by things, do you have adequate parking to accommodate
Sure.
3 uses or 4 uses? If you don't have it, it's not reasonable to ask you to try and do it.
Right. Like, I have less worry about today when all of the people that developed this are here. But, 40 years from now, somebody may look at that and say, no, that's what it is. And you're right, Jim, it may just be that really was a way to prohibit use because
Yeah.
it just isn't workable to do.
Common sense goes out the window.
Right,
And you're not
exactly.
going to know what the intent was.
They're gonna say, what were we thinking?
Right.
I mean, if the group is supportive of adding that language in, we can copy that up and add that,
Sure.
give the planning board a little more, I mean, we've tried throughout the document to give the Board of Jurisdiction a little more flexibility.
Just out of curiosity, how did the conversation go with Manitou? What's the surrounding properties size and what did they?
I mean, Manitou is a little bit different of an animal. It's,
Consolidate.
the majority of it is probably going to be bought by one entity.
Right.
So it's a little bit different. We did talk about the Gentles Market piece up on the road. There's 3 parcels up there, so those are a little bit, out of what that core area is. But that group, basically, the majority of the piece is being sold by Dolomite. It's going to get sold as one unit to probably one developer, and it's a bit of a different animal than here. You have so many different parts and pieces, and this is going to be a quilt work of, as individual properties go up for sale and get redeveloped and everything else, how to mesh those together, so.
So let me ask you this, so I buy a 30-acre parcel, but I subdivide it into 3 10-acre parcels. So I can avoid doing what the greater than 30 is. Where does that, where do you throw that?
Played the game.
Still be, which is the same.
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess if you put in the caveat at the Board of Jurisdiction, I mean, you still got to come to the planning board or town board or whoever is deemed as the board of determinants at that point, and they would have to kind of work through that negotiation with the developer.
Well, the other part of this is, with so many uses, unlike Manitou, which doesn't have any commercial around it, Route 250 has, compared to 30 years ago, a ton of commercial around it. So how much more could somebody want within a 5-acre parcel where they couldn't get it just a mile down the road? And what would be the attraction to going to a 5-acre parcel versus going down to the plaza?
Well, I'm hoping you're building in a demand. I mean, once you put, pent-up demand of residential units there, then you're going to want services closer to where you are. But, I mean, that's why we had, this language in here. So if, the guy to the north of you builds a 100% commercial or does something, again, you need a mix of uses, but, he's very heavy on his end. This gives some flexibility here to say, as you said, there's not really demand for commercial now that I'm coming to build. He took all the demand at this point. The board has some flexibility in that on that piece, and but at least 25% is in there as a target number to strive for, but it gives them some flexibility if they have a market study that says they used it all up, it's more senior housing, it's more something else is kind of where I see the demand, because as you say, 40 years, 50 years, whatever down the road, we don't even know half the uses of what there are today. There could be something different tomorrow.
I think the ability for the planning board to have some jurisdiction over that too is, they could also say, look, if you're gonna do 15% commercial versus 25, and we don't need to do that commercial right now because the guy next to you just did 85%. You build out the residential components that you want to, reserving that area for commercial at some point in the future, and then tie it in as the market allows it to occur. There has to be that kind of flexibility, otherwise, I think you need to get the rooftops down first before you're gonna get people to come there to serve the neighborhood.
Shop to business to work.
So, I mean, I can add this, or we can add this language to the zones up above. We can modify, what those medium numbers are, bring those a little bit closer together.
Did you want to change the numbers on the acreage from 2 to something else?
You recommended
Does the committee
5
wanna
as
do that?
the small, and then,
Is that too small?
Well, I said 10, but
I think it should be
10 would be big for small.
divided, but I don't have the ability to tell you what,
I mean, we can ask the consultant, and they have, you know, some recommendations. We can share that back with the group and say, they say 5 is as small as you want to call small, and
Yeah, but also, Mark, at the end of the day, it's the decision of this committee and what this committee wants to do,
it is.
not
but
necessarily
it's a
what the consultant
recommendation.
wants.
No, but if the committee is looking for some input, you know, and needs some feedback,
Right.
we've hired a consultant that, you know, we've hired them as the expert. It's not their, it's
can't
not their
imagine-
say. It's
We
the
would ask
committee's
them
say,
for another
but-
recommendation.
But if the committee was looking for some input,
can't imagine on 10 acres, 4 uses is going to be difficult to accomplish. But I don't have the basis to back that up with anything other than just a conversation.
I could actually definitely see 4 uses on a 10-acre parcel. Not the way everything is zoned today, but to me, the way the overall idea of this conceptually is, when I look at this as it's like a new town center
Right.
for Penfield, and kind of a complete paradigm shift as to the way things have been done in the past. And it's up to everybody at this table to, okay, what does that mean? And, you know, myself, I'm having a little bit of a hard time, I guess, really grasping it and finding out what everybody else's vision is on this. You know, what's your vision? What's your vision? And, you know, what do you see it looking like 40 years from now?
yeah, boy, that's a great question. The biggest concern I have, AJ, is we have Route 250 that goes right down the middle. You know, if it was all, you know, all the examples that I look through, I see that, but I don't see how that gets duplicated necessarily, because they're cut parcels. And so what, as a property owner, my concern is, okay, let's not make this be a land preservation piece, which I know isn't the intent, but it could be the unintended consequence if the box is built so tightly that a developer looks at it and says, "Are you
It's
kidding?"
not worth it.
It doesn't, well, not even it doesn't work, it just doesn't make sense. I got a 13-acre parcel in that zone that I was talking about, you know, that might be available, but how can I make a town center there when we've got another one up on the corner of Atlantic, you know? And so then if it turns out to be, well, it's never going to be developed, then that's really a land preservation process. And there's a
Right.
different process that should be used if that's indeed what the consequence is, whether it's the intent or not.
Right.
That could be the consequence. So,
well, we also need to remember this is going to be a living document too, so
well,
we're going to,
how does it live though, Mark? I mean,
Yes
once
and
it's, yeah, I agree with that. Yes and no.
I mean, it can be modified. I mean, as any ordinance or any zoning district of the town, we can adjust those. It goes through a town board process. You can have a, you know, a public hearing and modify it. It's not
The
an
time
easy.
frame of that compared to
It's
the
not
time
a
frame
simple, I mean, it's easier to
Yes.
modify it now than it is later on.
It's
but-
not a very living document at that point, because I think the public, you know, when you have a public meeting at that point, you know, it's kind of like, well, hey, I kind of like it as open space. You know, I'm not too interested in,
Right.
you know, I'm just saying, the
Traffic's
public.
terrible today on
Right,
250.
so
you know.
as a non-property owner, you would come to that and say, oh no, why would we loosen the restrictions on this when the planners, this was their intent? Well, because the intent isn't economically feasible for anybody to do it. You know, again, I'm not trying to be an obstructionist, just trying to make sure that the vision is in alignment with the intent.
I guess the way I see it, I mean, we're coming down to the wire here, and, I mean, frankly, everybody can be politically correct and nice and not really say what they want, and then all of a sudden this document goes through, and nobody has anything that they want.
Right.
Nobody's happy.
Yeah, again, I don't know about you, Larry, I don't know what I want, because I don't know what, I'm not in the development business, I don't know what a developer will look at and say, oh, yeah, that's perfect.
I don't necessarily look at it as what's a developer want. To me, it's more like what would a guy like Zach or Doug, the guys that are under 30 years old, what's going to make them want to live in Penfield?
Yeah.
I mean, you look around the table, we're all a bunch of, we're too old really to be making these decisions. Because,
He looked right at you.
we have people fleeing this state and they go to different climates and they don't necessarily go to a warmer climate, they go to something that is more well suited to what they want as their lifestyle. And do we want to keep those people here? I guess that's a question. Or do we want to just continue the way we've been going for the last 60 years and people will still leave?
So along those lines, Mark, I mean, again, my take is, because I don't have a crystal ball, and I am too old, and it probably won't be me dealing with it, but, if I could see 8 of them that look just like this 250 or 9 Mile Point corridor, I think, okay, I get it. But I can't, and so with that in mind, I lean towards having some flexibility built in, some discretion.
Sure.
So that there can be some interpretation of, instead of all hard, fast. And Dave, I understand your point. You're talking about devil's advocate. What if somebody did that? Well, that could happen in theory, but the reality is, what we know today is there are many, many parcels that are far smaller than 30 acres in this zone, in this corridor. And so that's not a what if scenario. That is a here and now scenario. We've got 8 acres here and 15 acres there and a bunch of those. So.
Well, to Dave's question, I think the reality is that one of the boxes you check on your application form is how many acres of land do you have under your control. You may only be proposing development 10, but if you own 20 others, the town's going to ask you what your plan is for the other 10. And they may very well impose something on those 10 acres as a condition of the approval of the first 10.
We would ask for an overall plan to show.
Otherwise, it's segmental site plan review, and I don't think the town's going to allow that. But there's lots of ways to get around the system, and we have to protect ourselves against that. Can we jump down one line?
Sure.
Still in Zone B, if you go down to mixed use, emphasis, diverse medium to high density residential uses, I'm in complete agreement that that's the goal of Zone B. Then if you move down to maximum building size, it's 5,000 square feet per level. If it was higher density residential and the units were 1,100 square feet each, you'd only be able to have 4 on the floor. That'd be 4,400 feet plus some hallways. I thought that the 5,000 square foot was a restriction on any single retail, commercial, professional office type use for the footprint of the building, and not how big a cluster of residential units could be.
You tell me.
I don't think we spelled it out, but I think you got a fair meaning of what we're looking for.
I think that for high density residential, they need footprints bigger than 5,000 square feet.
I know we kind of.
Well, I think the idea is that the single unit might be where you're at.
Well,
Not to exceed.
right, and I don't think there's any demand for residential units greater than 5,000 feet.
Well, I think we need to clarify that then, because right now we say maximum building size, so building would be townhouse,
Right, but I
apartment
mean,
building, whatever.
an apartment building could have 10 units per floor, or 8 units per floor, and that might be 10,000 square feet.
We can change it to say maximum unit size. I don't think you're going to 5,000 with a townhouse and apartment unit, but.
Well, I think you're right as far as the 5,000 feet goes, meant to be a single user to keep out the supermarket or the big box.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
You could specify
5,000 feet is the
between,
maximum non-residential use.
Yeah.
Yeah, could specify between the two.
Everybody okay with that?
I thought that was the original plan.
Let's go back.
When we came up with 5,000 square foot, that wasn't that the cutoff for some of the big box stores, and that's what
Yeah,
we came up with that
went
number.
bigger than that, so, but I think that's an important clarification, you know, from Bob, that we can put that in. Anything else on this chart?
You want to hear my spiel one more time?
Sure.
Okay. Now I'm back up to permitted uses and the statement that says that it has to be 25% non-residential or as determined by the board having jurisdiction, and then we talked about how many different uses there would be based on different sizes of lots and so forth. And it is a complex issue, but my recollection of the presentation made by the consultants on multiple occasions was that the mixed-use developments that failed in the past, when the autopsy was done on that failure, was that there was insufficient commercial and non-residential uses to make it sustainable. So I have some concern about giving the planning board the ability to just say that they will reduce the amount of non-residential uses based on an economic study performed by the developer, because if we don't do something about it, we're going to wind up with just a lot of residential. And 200 acres, 300 acres, 400 acres, I don't know how many acres there are down there, all different kinds of residential is not what the vision for mixed-use development is. If you want 12 different kinds of residential developments, from assisted living to patio homes, you can do that with a planned unit development and get away from all of these special provisions for mixed use. And with the Manitou group earlier today, we were going to go back and ask the consultant one more time, how strongly do you feel that the minimum amount of non-residential in a successful mixed-use development is 25%? And if the industry believes that that's a critical number, then I don't think we want to just build into the ordinance a mechanism for people to deviate from that.
Right, we spoke in a previous meeting and we said, is this the minimum, or is there just, or is 20% the minimum? Is this 25% recommended, or is it the absolute minimum that's feasible?
And maybe the consultant will come back and say that the ideal range is
Right.
20 to 35 or 20 to 70 or something, and that might be a nicer way to put it into the ordinance.
As opposed to saying, give jurisdiction to bring it down to 10% and then it's no longer feasible.
And you run the risk that it's not going to be sustainable.
What's the rest of the group's thoughts?
Well, I think it also works out better to have some range rather than an absolute number. Not that it has to be very wide range.
But a range nonetheless.
You know, what are you going to do? Sit down and say, okay, I got exactly 7,500 square feet of residential, exactly 25% commercial? I mean,
Well, the range would hopefully give an indication of some level of flexibility within the written document.
it doesn't have to be a huge range, but some.
Something to show that there is flexibility.
But by the same token, wasn't it the consultant that said right from the beginning, for this to be a tax advantage to the town, you needed that 25% commercial to sustain it before it becomes a tax burden?
I think that's another just excellent point. I thought that this process was predicated on the assumption that this was going to be tax base neutral. And from the perspective of town taxes, I think that what we're talking about, it will be. But if it turns out to be 90% residential with a variety of different styles of residential, we could have a very negative impact on school districts.
So we'll get verification from the consultant that 25% is an absolute minimum for a successful project long-term, or what's an acceptable range to put in there, so that we do have some of that flexibility as well. But try to avoid the recommended verbiage and then not giving an out to a developer saying, well, our market study says we can't do 25%, we can do 15, and we say, well, that's not acceptable.
But, and we don't know how it's going to be developed. The next project in may be a project that has a significant amount of commercial. And if you get a chunk of commercial up front, then maybe you have the flexibility of having a little higher percentage of residential on another project, and the whole development is still tax base neutral. On the other hand, if the first 4 projects in are residential with no restriction on age or family size or amenities and who is going to live there, you can wind up with something that has a very bad impact on the schools.
Thank you for bringing that up again.
Doesn't the way that it's written allow the premise that you brought up? You're not going to be exactly 75-25. And this doesn't say exactly 75-25.
But I
It says
guess-
recommended 25, being non-resident, or is determined by the board having jurisdiction. So someone's going to present something that's 76-24. or
Yeah, but I think if you say it's
71,
between 20 and 30 or 20 and 40,
now you create an absolute. So
But I
if
think
you
you
allow the board to be able to do their job, because you're going to have a whole site proposal sent to them, I'm just guessing this, I'm not in a land developing, but I'm sure they're going to come through and say that. You're going to look at what's next to them that's developed, and if theirs is more skewed one way, you might want to skew it back, and you could always say, no, we will not allow this as a board because you don't fit that. So I would think that you would want to select or elect or appoint people on your board that are going to work in the best interests of your town so that these things don't get run askew. So the board's not going to say, no, well, yeah, we're going to allow it to be only 5% because we want it to only be 5% because that's what you're at. I'm sure the board has the chance to be able to say, it's way too far off. So you have to have people in positions in your government that have enough common sense to be able to say, yeah, and you have to give them a range to be able to work in, whether you write it as between 20 and 30 or say recommended. It doesn't say absolute, it says recommended. And a recommendation is just that. It's not an absolute, it's a recommendation. So we want to see something to fall around this generally throughout the entire development. And if you're looking for the scope of the entire development, that's a lot different than each little one. So if each little one is 25, 25, 25, but one is 10, and one's 15, and one's 30, one's 40, now the whole development will roughly be close to 25 if the board takes into consideration the macro structure, not just each microstructure. I think a recommendation is just that, a recommendation, and you have to
I still
allow-
think you're better off with a range even, because you've held them within that, and then one of the biggest points, even with the comp plan, was, the tax neutral part, as far as the implications to current residents, the impacts. So with an absolute range, you have kept that to some control.
Either which way, a recommendation or absolute range, but an exact number can't be. But this allows you to use a range, it doesn't say you can't.
I understand that.
What about the developer who was in here last time we met? What did he think? I mean, he had to have had some opinion on this.
I think any developer, has concerns with an exact percentage number. I think tying them to anything. He has a market study. He has his numbers where, he's at. I think I won't speak for him, but, I think tying any, they want as much flexibility as possible. So, their market study comes in. I think as Joe indicated, if the guy before him comes in and has 40% commercial, he's going to be hard pressed to show that he can fit 25% on his piece if the other guy was heavy on his. But I think if you look at the macro structure of it all and how it all kind of fits together, I mean, this is going to be 250 is a different animal than Manitou Lake. This is going to be a patchwork quilt of, if you have a 2-acre piece and you have to say, I have to fit commercial on my 2-acre piece, non-residential, where you don't own a corner lot or you're not on the 250 Atlantic intersection, I think it may be tough. If you're closer to the intersection, you may want to go higher with your commercial percentages if you're right at the intersection. So I think there's going to be some give and take in it, no matter what.
Did he have any major problems with any portion of this? I mean, I presume you read it.
The hard percentage number of saying it has to be this is a minimum, he did have a hard time with that.
And he wanted to go which way on it?
I believe he was more residential.
He wanted more residential.
His market study said that commercial was a little light out there and he thought 25% was heavy.
And would his opinion of that change had there be more stuff built? I mean, because he'd be the first guy, right?
I mean, I think once you get rooftops in there, then obviously the market changes. If you build 300 residential units on one area, then obviously now you have a built-in market demand. You have more people come into the area, you have traffic that comes to it the next piece in. Obviously the market study, may change. As Jim had indicated, I think being the first guy in, it's going to be hard to put some commercial out there. I think the rooftops, will come first of anything. You got to build in a demand, and then you kind of bring in the resources or the services back to the residents as they demand them.
Mark, I had another question. If I, as a developer, buy a parcel and there's 2 different zones on it, are you gonna look at that each zone I have to be this way, or, or am I gonna be able to move things around a little bit because I own both? Because realistically, the way it's written, if I buy A and B, I gotta build A right here in this way, and I gotta build B this way over here.
No, and that's why we've tried to show the bubble portions just as bubbles. So obviously based on soil types and based on, groundwater and based on developability of it, yes, we've shown that, it may make more sense at the intersections to have a higher zone A, but if that makes more sense over here, over there, we've shown them not as hard, fast lines. We're not going to put dimensions to them. They are bubbles so that, the Board of Jurisdiction can say, no, it makes more sense to be over here and you have a little density here, but, it doesn't make sense as much in this area, so they have some flexibility to that.
Mark, back to Bob's point, I understand where you're coming from completely, though I love the discretion in there. I'll leave it to AJ and all of the other folks on the committees again, I just worry about the unintended consequence of land preservation as opposed to intended development.
I can't speak for Bill, but I can certainly speak for myself in terms of what do I see from my property. I think I see more clearly what's being driven as a catalyst with the YMCA development as large as it is and as big as it is. I can't speak for Bill in terms of the pressure that puts on adjacent properties, but it certainly makes me look at my property and say, okay, how can we develop a synergistic relationship that's going to make it beneficial for both and thus community. When I think about the development up on Atlantic and 250, not that that's real far from 250 and Penfield Road, but there's nothing up there. For me, I've always watched the YMCA and said, okay, this is what's going to drive the direction of the development of my property. I'm planning it that way because that's what's happening. That's what I have to go on.
Well, this falls right into place with that.
It does. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of thinking, okay, residential, yeah, probably. To some degree, commercial up the road. I still own some of that acreage up there, obviously. To what extent, I can't tell you. I have no clue, but I know that there's going to be a balance when I see all those cars fill up that parking lot, and park on your property in the wintertime.
That's a good situation.
If it turns out, if it turns out that the YMCA is the driving force, and that brings in physical therapy and health training and pharmacies and related medical, physical fitness, health food kinds of things, and everyone that uses that drives to it, then that is not going to be developed as a mixed-use project. It's going to become a medical fitness health food node, like around Strong Hospital. And that's not exactly what the vision was originally. I mean, having a YMCA in the middle of your neighborhood so that you can walk down to the YMCA sounds like or walk to the library sounds like a wonderful thing to be able to do. But if the YMCA gets so large and the development around it gets so large, it's going to make it less attractive for residential.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
I don't think I do either.
I think it's going to increase people wanting to live near there, so that they can walk to that, and walk to their doctor, and walk to that, and then walk to the dry cleaners, or walk to the local deli, and walk to those types of things. They don't want to get on the main road and drive 20 minutes or something like that. They would like to be able to ride their bike or walk to these types of things. The more I travel and see these things across our nation, I see that more and more. Judd, you're talking about very specifically what's happening around Strong. Well, where Strong is, where all the medical buildings are, it's fine. But if you've driven by Collegetown or Mount Hope, obviously you have. And there's a lot more there than just medical facilities. There's the Hilton, I believe, that's in the upper level. They've got the apartments for the students, for residents, for other faculty members and research people coming through. They've got a grocery store in there. They've got bookstores. They've got Breeze Yoga in there. They've got a zillion different types of things. And that's right next to the highest concentration of healthcare you can have in this entire part of the state. And just around Syracuse, if you look at their medical center, which it's older, it's kind of beat up and things like that. But there's a number of things all around there, and healthcare draws. And people want to live closer to where they work and live closer to the facilities that they use to support their lives. With this rebirth and people trying to build into the lofts in downtown. Why do they want to do that? Why do they want to get a Hart's grocery store and upgrade the Little Theater and upgrade the Performing Arts Center thing? Because they want to have people to live there. They want to be close to what they want to do. So I don't see that the YMCA is going to turn into Strong Memorial Hospital Research Center, but you're going to have a lot of small businesses that are going to satellite around there, providing just the things that you mentioned. And I think that would bring people to want to live there. It wouldn't me.
But then that brings in the density question.
There was a very significant student population there before all that other stuff happened. I like your vision. I hope it turns out exactly like that. I have some concerns about the YMCA being the driver for this corridor. I think there's some negative impacts associated with that one huge use that doesn't have any real employment potential and walk to work kind of thing.
Whether you think it's going to be the driving force or not, it's there.
It is.
And it's not going to come down because you don't think it's the best provider of all these things for us.
Right.
So it's there, so let's find ways to complement the things that we cannot change. It's just my point.
I think it's a great discussion. Obviously, everybody's impassioned and all here for the same reason, so I think we're kind of circling around the same thing, trying to provide flexibility, trying to provide, direction. We can reach out to the consultants, see if they have some thoughts on that, feed that back to the group, but I think we're all kind of in the same arenas. That's what we've kind of struggled with all along, is having enough parameters around it to make sure we get what we want, but having enough flexibility to allow developers to come in and do something unique, allow it to, grow into something, that's unique to Penfield and, a great addition to the town. Always do all this, and then the state doesn't let us put a traffic light.
What is the story with that?
Some of the stuff we also want to talk about, and I don't mean to cut that conversation short if we still want to debate that some more. I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts on the section on 250, but one of the things we need to talk about, and this may spur some more conversation, is what the boundary is. We've shown a bubble for a long time. When and if this is rezoned, it can no longer be a bubble. We need to have hard, fast, it needs to be a district with property boundaries and bearings and distances and everything else. So we took what was the bubble, tried to snap that to what we saw to be property lines, but we kind of wanted to go through that with the group, parcel by parcel, area by area, see what the group's thoughts were and make sure, this is the boundary that you're comfortable with for that area. It's a little hard to see on the screen, but, we have, here's Larry's property here, here's the YMCA property. We can kind of start with the southern section and work our way northward. So this is YMCA, where the majority of the building is, YMCA Fields. This is where the gray house is. This is Massey's property here. Then you open up into Country Club East on this piece. This is the church on the other side. This is Hidden Hollow is here, going north. These hatched out areas are areas we've already bought the development rights to that kind of buffer it to the east. So it was Casa Larga's piece. Bill Wickham owns at least these two pieces now. And carving this line north, if you kind of followed that line there, this was one question parcel we had here that would either kind of be caught between mixed use or would be the first piece that, kind of buffered to the east. Going north, we had the properties on the east of 250. And then going up, we have, this is the backyard of the Mattakit neighborhood, which was out of it. This is a private drive here with, 4 homes on this piece. And then this kind of takes it up along the 250 corridor there. If you keep going north, I guess we'll go around counterclockwise. The pieces on this side are already zone limited business over here. So it kind of made sense to incorporate those. The other point of note is Commission Ditch kind of comes down through here and feeds off some of this, which kind of creates a natural buffer on the east side there. So that's kind of been the dividing line there. And then you can see in the latest rendition of the bubble map, we've shown kind of a chunk, and we haven't defined exactly where it breaks. It's down these property lines or not, or where it goes through to be a Zone C. The town board committed to making those or keeping those 1 or 2 acre residential homes as a buffer to what is mixed use. They've kind of committed to that, so we've shown that as a modified Zone C up here, but where that falls between parcels or on property lines, that's all up for discussion. West side, it kind of comes down this property line. This is the gun club here, these 2 parcels on this side, and then coming further south, Mallory Lane. It's down here. These are residential homes that are fairly well buffered there. And then this gets into the back of Penfield Country Club is over on this side here. And then you have wetlands kind of buffer that section. And then this is the back of the YMCA parcel there. What's the group's thoughts about that boundary? What do you like? What don't you like? What concerns do you have? And it's all.
To change it, I think that makes sense.
What about this one parcel here was the one that we had kind of the most question about?
Leave it in or take it out?
We have some photos of,
This is one place?
Yeah.
We do? Those
so the question is it buffered well enough from the neighbors around it to incorporate it, or is it not buffered where it sticks out like a sore thumb? Is a potential commercial property next to residential uses? And in Bill's case, he's got some restrictions of use on those properties for agricultural
No.
purposes.
That's not. Well, it was, It was part of, yeah. it's-
That's the,
yeah.
is that
But
the
I don't know.
homestead?
like where the barn was and everything?
Yeah, I think the shop and there's a house there.
Well, that's next to it.
Oh, wait,
It's back there. This is at the end of,
This is before that property.
you can go back to the map. It's there. That's that property.
No.
no,
No.
no, that's that property that you just
One
showed.
little box,
there must
that
be-
property right there.
Well, if that's the case, yeah, you're right, because it's
That's
beyond,
Dublin,
it's
right?
not quite to Dublin Road yet, that's right.
Wasn't that part of the original conservation easement?
That's an exception parcel that was left out as a homestead out of that.
Take the photograph.
But I say with the photo, it has some, large garages, buildings and stuff on it
It kind of lends itself.
already that, does that make more sense to tie into mixed use? But, with the town-owned or the development right-owned piece going to the east of that.
No,
Thing is, if you leave them out, is he not like an island? I mean,
And that's kind of where we,
surrounded, but I can't be part of?
no, we didn't say, we just kind of put a bubble as a
Yeah, I
question
know.
mark. If
we
you,
want you to give us the input.
I mean, this kind of made
Well, I
a
would
clean boundary line here,
We're
but
willing to go with either way you want.
this kind of left one guy standing out on
It's
his
the
own.
only, the last property available that, except for what is in reserve.
And that's why we showed it within the bubble today, but we just want to bring that up as
Yeah,
a
I mean,
question mark for the group that,
We want your input on it.
I mean, this is all
Okay.
development right owned. This would be mixed use. This would be basically a standalone property. It's zone 1 acre. Two acre. Yeah, it'd be a 2 acre zone parcel in the midst of kind of an island on their own.
The guy that's gonna buy the property next to it wants it because it already has 2 uses on it, he only has to come up with 1 more use.
So,
Okay, well, it sounds like the group is okay with keeping
Including
that
it.
piece in. Any other changes, modifications to the boundary?
It wouldn't be fair to exclude it.
Okay. Well, if that's in, let's go back to the bubble map, make sure, well, it's kind of what we've called it,
the zone map,
the zone map.
instead of bubble board.
So we'd add that property as the one that's been excluded out of that, and then obviously we need to revise our zone map. Right now, it followed more what the bubble was, so we need to tighten that up and make that match what those property lines are. So this has been a bubble, we'll keep these fuzzy lines in the middle and fuzzy lines in here. That allows flexibility for the board if that morphs or changes within it. But these hard edges should, will follow property lines for what is in the zone and what's out of the zone. So we'll modify this map, but we didn't want to change this pending what the group's consensus was on the rest of it.
And it's okay for a single parcel to have more than one zone in it, correct?
Yeah. Yep, and that's it. We distinctly didn't go down property lines, whatever. It's just kind of what made sense around, core areas. Obviously, this is the YMCA. It's already, a dense use here. With a traffic light, we talked about this at the last time, the YMCA getting a traffic light in this area only kind of made sense to, have a higher intensity around that. We kind of debated the rest of this around where it went. Obviously, we can add that one little piece in, as far as a zone in there, and then the zone C, basically, we kept kind of cutting that down, would just be left as basically the buffer to the north from there, and more towards, the less dense zoning districts to the north.
And if a developer wanted to build a less intense use than was permitted in Zone A or Zone B, but met the criteria for a mixed-use district, that would be acceptable?
And this is just a maximum. I mean, this is the maximum intensity. You can build less than that, and it could redevelop into something else, but this is,
Yeah, you're not obligated to do it, but you have the option if you want.
yeah.
So in Zone B, if somebody wanted to do single family,
They would still have to have the mix of uses. They could do residential, or, even in Zone A, the person elected you know, they didn't want to do high density, whatever, but still want to do residential as long as they had their mix of uses and met the requirements, they could. They didn't have, you don't have to have a 4-story building in Zone A just because that's the maximum.
You could have
You know, if it
one
met the
story,
requirements, you could do,
mixture of uses with one
as
or
long
two
as you met
stories.
the other requirements of connectivity and pedestrian access, you could do that. Okay, any other comments about the text of the document? We've incorporated, and Zach went through, we incorporated application forms in the back for developer and for staff as checklists. Site design and architectural checklists. We've incorporated basically a submittal guideline for them. I believe this committee's consensus and the Manitou's consensus was recommending that the planning board be the board of jurisdiction. So we're still good with that? Okay. Yep. So basically the three items that I think we need to get out of tonight's as we kind of get towards the end of this is we have some technical stuff to still work out in that one area. We can get some information from the consultant and tweak that, but ultimately, is it this group's consensus to send this, once we finalize that, to the town board? Are we good with mixed use? This is your document. Are we as the collective group supportive of this document, supportive of mixed use as a whole? Okay. And then we talked in the past about having, you know, if the town board accepts this, it goes to public hearing, they go to make this a new district, that this would be rezoned at the time that this district was formed, rather than, you know, we originally talked out that each individual parcel, we would create basically a mixed-use zoning district within the code or mixed-use ordinance, but then each individual property would have to come in and basically apply to be rezoned to mixed use. I believe the consensus of the group at the last meeting and consensus of the Manitou Lake group was, if we're going to make the district, we're supportive of the document, let's rezone it all to mixed use at that time, and then when anybody comes in, they just make application based on that rezoning.
Correct.
Everybody's supportive of that? I mean,
So long
that's-
as the assessor supports current use as the valuation.
There won't be a change. in
No, the assessor assesses
I believe you.
what the property is, and
We've talked to the assessor about that.
Okay.
That doesn't mean she listens.
I've got one at the computer.
okay, the other piece we need, and I think is very important, is having support of all the owners within the district. We do have the petition here tonight, thank you. Many have signed it, many have not to date. We need to get out there and meet with the rest of the owners. It's here tonight if anybody that hasn't signed is interested in signing. But I think going to the town board with a collective voice from all the owners within that district saying, yes, we want mixed use, we would like our property rezoned, I think is a resounding call to the town board for that. And I think as we go forward, we'll have a public hearing, and Jim will get into next kind of where we go from here. He's broken down a timeline of how do we go from here, but I think it's important for this group, and we shared with the Manitou group, is to come out and support these efforts and the time you guys have spent on this to the town board. When it does go to public hearing, that obviously this has been a lot of time and effort, your effort and input in this, that you guys are supportive of this and support the application moving ahead.
With that petition that you've used, have you had people who have said no, they don't want to sign?
We haven't had, I think people just wanted more information and want to know what it is and what the district is going to be before they go ahead and sign it. So I'm not aware of anybody that says, no, I'm not going to sign it and I don't want any part of this. I think people just wanted more information, and I think there's probably residents we haven't reached yet. We tried to have a neighborhood meeting. We've advertised this, we've put this out on the web. We've tried to reach everybody we could. I'm not guaranteeing that we have. So I kind of put it out there tonight if anybody wants to sign for it. It's our effort after this, and if you talk to your neighbors and they haven't heard about it or want to get out there, but to go door to door and
I'll play devil's advocate.
Talk
So
to
do you
them.
carry two petitions? One for them to sign against versus to sign for?
we can if people don't want to be part of it, I mean, they have their
I
right to.
just, I'm just playing devil's advocate because as a town entity, you should be supporting the public of what they want.
Sure.
And so I, as a resident, want to say no. I think you should carry both. I mean, I just.
Well, I'm not sure we need to have a petition to say no. We're going to know.
Or you're not in support of.
Yeah, believe me, we're going to have a list of those that are not supportive of it. We do a lot of petitions for various reasons.
And I'm not going to say you can get one signature, but.
No, you're right, but I mean, we're certainly going to talk to them and explain to them as best we can why we're carrying the petition. If they're not interested in signing it, that's their right. We will list them down as somebody who's not supportive of it and make sure that, they're fully aware of public hearing process and all that when the time comes so they can get up and make their case known to the board.
I think our point also is we want to make sure that we've reached everybody who's in the zoning district so they've heard of it, they're aware of it, they know what it's all about and, can make an educated
So you're not
decision.
going outside of the district property line per se with what you're doing, is that?
No, because it's strictly the property owners who are interested.
Being rezoned, I mean, we've had meetings with East Penfield Homeowners Association, we had initial meetings with Wayland Meadows and Country Club East. We hosted a neighborhood session for Tomlinson and Renwick Run, so we've tried to, reach out to the neighborhoods around it, informing them this is what we're looking at, even when we first started the committee, so we've tried to reach out to the surrounding neighborhoods, let them know what's going on. We do have an email list that's following this. We send out email blasts trying to let everybody know we're having the meetings. They're online, the document's online, so we've tried to be as transparent as we can to let everybody know that this is going on and not operate in a box or,
And we've had a good response. We've had a good initial response, so I think it'll be okay, but certainly you're right. I mean, if people are not supportive of it, we'll make sure that they're identified and that they have their say when the time comes as well. This timeline we put together, the first thing I will say to you is we're fairly lucky in that we've been able to stay ahead of it by at least 1 week. So government is at its finest right now, 1 week ahead of the schedule. But notice that the heading is best case timeline for adoption. And best case has been easy so far because it's just been us working on a document and trying to stay within the parameters of the timeframes. It gets a little tricky after we start sending it off to the town board. They need time to review it. There's a lot to digest. We're going to have to spend some time with them to explain some of the nuances of the document. Once they're comfortable with it and they give us direction to start thinking about moving forward with the seeker process, where they will be the lead agency. There's a whole bunch of things that we have to do with seeker to make sure that we follow the state requirements. The board will probably then have work sessions where they'll talk about it so the public has a feel for it. As we move forward, the board becomes more comfortable, they'll direct us to hold a public hearing on the document. Hopefully we can hold a public hearing on that document as well as the proposed ordinance, as well as the proposed rezoning. So there's a lot of things that we have to do in the DEIS to address drainage, traffic, all sorts of things associated with the projects and the rezoning. Once the board gets through all of that and has their public hearing, they can then finalize the seeker process. We're suspecting that after the DEIS is prepared and reviewed by the public, there will be comments. The comments will have to be addressed in a final environmental impact statement. Once that's completed, the board can then take the position of accepting the final impact statement as complete, and then close the seeker process out. Then the final process would be then to pass resolutions to adopt the manual that you proposed, the ordinance that we're preparing, and then the rezoning for the properties that are involved. This is the very best time frame. This is assuming that nothing goes wrong. This is assuming that there are no glitches. Seeker is always a problem because there's always some kind of a glitch somewhere through the process. But it's a situation where they want to make sure it's done properly. There's adequate public participation and the issues at hand are addressed properly. So best case scenario, very best case scenario, 12/2/2015. If it goes overboard, it would be sometime in the first quarter of next year.
Sorry, I'm time traveling right now.
Sorry, I noticed a
I
little
noticed that.
discrepancy in that.
Where does sewers come into play with this?
Sewers are also an issue. That would be an environmental impact statement issue to be addressed as well. A lot of the property has access to sewers right now. Some of the properties don't, the central core area does not yet. And certainly we're gonna have to address that. We probably have to create some type of a sewer district possibly, or if they can bring the sewers down from other developers, that's another way to handle it. But generally speaking, probably the most efficient way to handle it would be to create a sewer district for that area.
What's the central court? Just so everybody knows.
North of you, I think you have access to sanitary. YMCA has access to it. What's his name? South of what? South of what?
So north of Atlantic?
Massey.
Massey has access to them. I know that north of Atlantic Avenue, the developers there are looking at the options to sewer their property through, actually not down through that corner, but further off to the west on Atlantic Avenue. So a lot of the areas will have access to sewer, some won't. We may create, you may petition us to create a sewer district and then go out and bond possibly whatever is remaining to be installed to accommodate sanitary. It may work out where we don't have to do that, but that's some of the issues that have to be addressed in the impact statement. And that's why we're preparing it.
What's the next step in terms of the feedback that came tonight? When will we see the next draft?
We have to clean it up for you, get it back to you so you all see what we talked about. If you're all happy with it, I don't think there's a need to meet again, but there's a need to get your input back to make sure you're all comfortable, and if you're not, we're gonna have to get you comfortable.
Well, we have core members or committee members 250 that aren't here tonight. Obviously, we want to make sure they weigh in as well, so we'll, give them an opportunity. As Jim said, I don't know if we're gonna, unless we need to, have another meeting with the whole group. But I think through email, or we have the Google groups, we could have a discussion on that amongst members. We've used that before, so, you can see what other people's comments are, or reply alls, and, we can work through some of that stuff from there.
You can tell with Denby, after you're pretty satisfied with the document, to get it off to the town board and let them start reviewing. So we want to get that done fairly quickly for you. We don't want to drag it out any longer than we have to. We want the town board to start reviewing this. They're going to need some time to do it. In fairness to them, it's taken us a long time to prepare it. It's going to take them a while to digest everything we're throwing at them. And then start moving through the secret process and getting that wrapped up.
Any questions?
Nice job.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming tonight.
Thanks for your input. We really
Appreciate the input. We appreciate you guys sticking with this project and
I have
see
the
it through.
petition if someone needs to sign it.